Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Rangers Review Extra. Myself and Adam Thornton here, slightly later in the week to talk about Rangers and tactics and anything else that pops into our head over the next 30 or 40 minutes or so. Today, we're going to kind of cover two bases, talk a little bit about Rangers 1-0 win over Dundee United. Now, I realise that was a few days ago, but some interesting themes in there. In particular, why did Rangers look good in possession, and then why didn't they? Why did they keep conceding counter-attacks? How did we kind of see that game overall? And then talking a little bit about Hamza Igamane, not to put too much pressure on him, Adam, but he is the striking option, the only striking option Rangers now have apart from Cyril Dessers. So we will talk about our first impressions from that substitute appearance he made up at Tannadice. But Adam, first and foremost, before we dive into the less important stuff, how are you getting on?
I'm good, thank you. I probably would have preferred a Champions League game, or definitely would have preferred a Champions League game midweek, but I can't say I was disappointed with a few days break from Rangers. But yeah, looking forward to getting into this one, and looking ahead to a busy week next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at the game in isolation first. Rangers 1, Dundee United 0. I'll pull up the trend line if people don't know what this is. The larger the indent, the higher the quality of expected goals chance. You can see when Tom Lawrence opened the score, and I think that was about 0.6. Clearly, Rangers' best chance of the game. Some brief notes on this, Adam. The expected goals finished, 1.71 to 0.29. Dundee United didn't have a shot on target. There's a few different dips in here, which we're going to speak about, notably the fact that Rangers didn't create much in the second half when the game became more stretched, and we'll get on to that until Hamza Igamane came on and effectively created a few chances single-handedly, or certainly linked the play to create those opportunities. You can see there, Adam, the home side, a 3% chance of winning. There was moments in this game where I was at it, where I felt like Rangers were losing a bit of control. Watching it back, they kind of, they didn't really concede, as the stats show, many dangerous openings at all. It reminded me a little bit of the away games that you saw under Philippe Clement early into his tenure. Maybe I'm thinking like Motherwell away right before or after Christmas, where Rangers get a couple early goals, and then because of how they're building the play, they don't lose the ball in bad areas, so that the rest of the game can become a bit of a non-event, a little bit direct. How did you see it overall before we get into the kind of specifics?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that opening half hour or so, I thought Rangers were really good. Created a decent amount of opportunities, but yeah, just the quality factor. I think for me, there was a lot more sort of central passing interplay. I thought certainly between Lawrence, Dessers, Diamande. The issue I've got with it, certainly with the first two, is it can be a little bit clunky. If we're being honest, we got two breaks of the ball, and that goal, it takes the goal really well. It's a nice move, but it's a little bit clumsy. Dessers getting the ball and sort of moving it forwards, and you can see the intent there. Whether that's we just got a bit of luck there, or whether it's trying to do something that the players aren't capable of, and it might get better once we've got Igamane, Barrie, all those type of guys in. I'm not sure, but I've certainly seen some different things in that first 20, 30 minutes of interplay. Yeah. And then once Dundee United changed up a little bit and went back to a back four, I think that maybe definitely didn't suit us and suited them a little bit more, and potentially we didn't quite get a handle on it for the next hour or so before Igamane came on.
Yeah. Until about the final 20 minutes. You can see that there with the kind of end. If you look at around 25 minutes, Rangers had created a lot of, maybe not high quality chances, but they were the momentum around the Dundee United goal was higher certainly than the next 40 minutes until Igamane came on late on. We'll look at why that was. The other big chance in the game was Dessers in the stroke of half time, about 0.36 xG, the one where he kind of should have maybe taken it earlier. I think he actually made the chance more difficult for himself when he took the angle.
Does sound like him, to be fair.
Yeah. Okay, here's a stat for you, right? That I think you will like, hopefully. So first, I'll tell you what Jim Goodwin said. Jim Goodwin said the shape of the team wasn't working early on. I think that's where the goal ultimately comes from. We were a little bit bare in the middle of the pitch. I think if you were to split this game and to understand why Rangers looked much better in possession, it's because Dundee United sat off and they gave them the territory. So my stat for you, Adam, is that Rangers completed 108 successful passes in the opposition's half inside the first 20 minutes. and then they only managed 92 in the remaining 70 minutes. Now, game state comes into that, right? The fact that they've got a 1-goal lead, they're sitting off a bit, but the type, it just shows you that when you were watching that game and you were, my impression of the game was, I've not seen Rangers dominate the territory like this much away from home at all. That they were able to complete more passes in the opposition half in the first 20 minutes than for the remaining 70 minutes. Why did that happen? Dundee United sat back. Now, Rangers were good in possession. We'll look at their pass network, which backs up what you were saying. There was a lot more central overloads. But Rangers effectively always had a +1 in the build-up. There was only one man, normally, Dundee United marker between Connor Barr and John Souttar and Robin Proper. United often fell back into a back five, and then Rangers could create those central overloads because United had, if I go back to this slide, they had a back three effectively up against Cyril Dessers. Lawrence was more in a left central midfield role. I'll throw this up here, the pass network, than a number 10 position. We've seen Clement use more of a 4-3-3 against back fives, I think in particular because he knows that he can create those central overloads against the opposition's midfield too. The fullbacks can provide more width. I think that's why you saw Kieran Dowell start. He got into some nice pockets of space. I thought his final ball was poor, and that led to the concession of a counter-attack in the second half. But I guess this backs up what we saw in the first half, Adam, that Rangers had the territory. They didn't have to build up through the thirds to get into United's path, which made it a little bit easier for them to create chances. And some of the play was really nice in that opening 20 minutes. But I guess, as we'll come on to discuss, I guess a bit of the concern is that when United did change their shape around 25 minutes and go more aggressive, then the kind of passes in the opposition's half, that really fell off after about the 20-minute mark.
Yeah, and I guess to make that, try and bring that to life a little bit, if Dundee United played effectively a 5-4-1, I guess so. They've got five defenders up against 3 attackers, if you like, and Cortez, Dessers, and Kieran Dowell. So they've got 2 spare men at the back, which it's fine, but like you said, it's understanding then where we've then got the overload, because they've got 2 spare men at the back, then we've got 2 spare men somewhere else. Obviously, our 2 defenders would be up against 1 striker, so there's 1 spare man, and the other one is in the middle. We effectively had 2 central midfielders from Dundee United up against 3 central midfielders from Rangers, like you said. Tom Lawrence coming deeper, as we can see there, and Igamane. So that is kind of what teams have been doing to Rangers for a bit, where we've only really had the 2 in there, and they've been sitting a 3, and they've been sort of swamping us a little bit. So because they sat back and didn't really have any centre halves stepping up and joining the midfield, then like you said, that becomes a bit of an issue. When they then change and go obviously to the 3 in the middle, then it becomes a little bit more even, and then I think we struggled in there as we would do, as we have done in the middle for 6 months now, probably. So that, I guess, explains it. Like you said, they sat back, they didn't have the extra man. We had the extra man in there, and we were able to get that territory in there. We did see Connor Barron do some really nice stuff. There was a couple of lovely direct passes right through the middle of the pitch, which I really liked. But he was given the space to do it. Then when they cut the space off, we weren't able to adapt. And I sort of get your point about sitting back, etc. But it's 1-0 against a newly promoted team. We really shouldn't be sitting back. We should be going for the throttle and getting 2 or 3 goals before half time. So yeah, I can understand both sides of it, but just to sort of paint the picture a little bit of where the overloads were and why Rangers had that domination, I think it's probably because we had that extra man in there.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think that off the ball, Clement's shape, I definitely think that one of the big issues we're deviating a little bit here. In Old Firm games, for example, I think Rangers they just need to go. Like, if they go man for man when they're pressing high, loads of teams do that now, but loads of teams also then sit back in a zonal block so that they're not kind of pulled apart when they're on the back foot in a pressing structure. So I think there's not enough variation probably in Clement's style off the ball, but on the ball, we are starting to see more of a 4-3-3. Lawrence is picking up the ball pretty deep. And as mentioned, because if Rangers start with more of a 4-2-3-1, then you don't create probably that overload in the middle. So I did think that was a better example of maybe a little bit of adapting to the opposition. This is what it looked like in the second half, the build up more often than not. Very simply, United had an extra man at the front end of the pitch, and at points there was a couple of occasions where Rangers played through pretty well. There's quite a few occasions where they didn't. Butland had a bad game, probably with the ball at his feet, I think it's fair to say. And
Definitely.
if I just show you this, Adam, before I throw it back to you, this is the kind of passing indexes, which shows firstly how the Rangers' long pass share rose as the game wore on, and secondly how their possession fell. So if the image to the left of people's screen here, you can see that their long pass share inside those first 15 minutes is really, really low.
Yep.
That really shoots up around the 31 to 45 minute mark when United make their shape change, goes back down again at the start of the second half, after half time. Maybe Clement's calmed them down a little bit. They're not going as direct because they have had a real propensity to go direct under Clement and build up in general. And then that obviously increases towards the end of the game, which maybe wasn't too much of a bad thing because, as we'll get to, Hamza Igamane came on. The possession on the other side, you can see how much of the ball they had in the first 15 minutes comparatively to the rest of the game. Both of those really illustrate, I guess, what you're saying about how that game played out.
And I think that's the issue, that change that Dundee United made, and whether we didn't adapt to it, whether we couldn't adapt to it, I think those are the issues. So I completely agree. The first half we adapted quite well to having that extra man in there. We didn't adapt when it went back to maybe more like we thought it would, and that's
Yeah.
all about bravery for me. That's about players bringing the ball forwards, centre halves bringing the ball forwards, midfielders looking for the ball. There's still a little bit too much of attackers standing facing the play, waiting for the ball to be played into them. Now, I get you want to do that sometimes, but not all of you. Someone needs to be moving left to right. Dessers doesn't want to come deep, doesn't want to run in behind, doesn't want to run left to right, doesn't really want to do anything except get the ball facing the goal with about 10 yards from goal. So that can be a bit of a challenge, moving teams about and creating space. But yeah, the fact that they made that change and almost immediately we panicked, didn't adapt, whatever. But you can see the fact that we were going long, almost triple what we were in the or triple what we were in the early games, in the early minutes. That speaks to me that they've blocked off the passing angles, and we're not brave enough to get the ball through. No one's moving to make space. Therefore, we're resorting to going long and trying to win off flick downs, which is not ideal.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a mixture of things. But for me, if you watch Clement's football, sometimes I think players maybe struggle a little bit. They want to go direct. Going direct, now, however you constitute going direct, whether that be a direct pass from Butland to the striker, or whether it be just trying to build through the thirds directly at speed, sometimes that topic and controlling the ball, I think, kind of clash a little bit. For
Yeah.
me, Robin Proper, people are saying, what's Robin Proper bringing so far? I needed, obviously, a bigger sample size to maybe judge him too much, but I think he's more composed on the ball, and he's happier to invite pressure. And there's not been a ton of examples of Rangers being a really good build-up side from the back yet, so far by any measure. But in particular, I think that's what Proper is good at. He can invite pressure. He's more comfortable, kind of even just visibly putting his studs on the ball and not wanting to hit a diagonal forwards or whatever. He can invite pressure. That's definitely something that has improved, but the build-up overall maybe hasn't. I'm going to show this GIF, Adam, which shows how Rangers maybe did try to build up, but then equally the negative side of how they play. Obviously, how you defend has how you attack has real implications into how you defend. Rangers, although they didn't concede many opportunities, they did start to concede a few more transitions that they hadn't in the first half. And I think this GIF, which I'll play through a couple of times and then I'll pause just so people can get used to it. I thought this GIF, just after, about 10 minutes after halftime, showed why. It's when Kieran Dowell gets the ball in a nice position, tries to play through Dessers, doesn't get there, and United break into this position. Now, from this position, the ball actually doesn't go over the top. This is the move where it goes wide to, I think it's Trapowski, and he curls a shot. But there was an opportunity for United. They've kind of got three men in the last line there. If I play it through one more time, and I'll put a couple of my points across and put it back to you. But increasingly, we did see Rangers start to concede these transitions in the second half. This opportunity reminded me very much. Remember the goal Rangers conceded away at Aberdeen in the 1-1 draw early on under Clement, where I think it was Tom Lawrence gives it away, the middle of the pitch is open, and Aberdeen go up the other end and score. It's something we saw really start from March onwards. Before the Ross County game, Hibs at home. Why is the centre of the pitch not protected? A few thoughts on that from me. If I pause this at a few different moments, you can see, right, Rangers get the extra man down. Lawrence creates a 4v3. That's fine. You still have the numerical overload and you can get the ball into a better area of the pitch. Proper takes it forward. this is like the difference between what should be a really good opportunity for Rangers, but when it doesn't come off, it becomes a dangerous opportunity. Because look at those 4 Dundee United players in the middle of the pitch. I still think the issue is because Rangers don't prioritise like numerical cover in the centre of the pitch on the ball, it means quite often they don't off the ball as well. Again, we saw this at a lot of points last season. Like from this position, Dowell should do better. I thought his final ball in these areas on a couple of occasions into Dessers wasn't good enough. But then if you look at this scene here, United's player, when they've got 6 Rangers players around the ball, shouldn't be able to then carry the ball here. Where there is an easy pass over the top of the defence. And for me, that's very indicative of the fact that Rangers, they maybe aren't counter-pressing great as a team at the moment, but I think that comes down to the fact that there sometimes appears to be this confusion between crowding the ball and then marking their individual men. And also just very simply, because they're not a team who really prioritises central overloads on the ball, it can lead the centre to looking a bit weak off the ball. Is that fair?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's an element of it as well as the players were asking to do it. Not necessarily that. I mean, Dill gets the ball. Dill gets the ball in a good position, and you can lose it there. I think that's fine. But if we think about, I guess, where Dill's had to drift in, to pick that ball up. You're kind of wanting someone to be ahead of the 2 Dundee United players. So where Barron is just now. You maybe want someone to be 10 yards, 15 yards further forward there. Whether that's Barron, I don't know, because that then vacates already the midfield area. But plenty of other teams manage that. So maybe it's Barron that needs to be 10, 15 yards further forward and Tavernier needs to be in a little bit, or vice versa. One needs to be up and one needs to be in. But I think that thing that we've seen sometimes with Clement, where Tavernier or Ridvan come into the middle, and are able to protect a little bit better. I think something like that in that scenario might have been helpful. But obviously Tavernier doesn't have the physical capability, isn't playing well enough to really do 1v1 against many people just now. But also I think with Lawrence, the fact that Lawrence comes deep to collect the ball and gives us that overloads, I'm kind of going to be hypocritical a little bit because I like that, but he doesn't have the physicality to then go and join the attack. So by the time it's a good ball through, really good ball through for Dowell again. That's what you want a deeper midfielder to be doing. But then because he's then vacated the attack, we're a man down in attack. So if he's trying to get up there to support, by the time he commits to getting up there, the ball's been turned over and it's backed away, and then he can't offer anything in defence as well. So I don't know how you solve that. Ideally, you solve that for me by having a kind of proper midfield 3 and the attack, the wingers are a little bit closer to the number 9, and you can play through the lines a little bit better, or you have physical monsters in the middle that can win the ball back and dominate and get up there and support the attack, but still have the legs to get back and stop the transitions. I think if you're going to be as open as this, the physical profile really needs to change considerably. You need to have players that are capable in defence of defending 1v1, dominating their man 1v1, and then midfielders in the middle that can go two-way, can be involved in the attacks, but still come back and defend the transitions. I think that's if we're going to play in this way, I think it's the physical profile of the players that we're asking to do it. Dowell, Lawrence, Tavernier, that aren't really what we're after.
Profile is a great point, because if you look at, for me, Lawrence here, he should probably just go and close down the ball, but because he backs off, like if you look here, Rangers are a bit of a weird defensive structure where they still have the numbers in Dundee United, but everyone's kind of running backwards.
So he's doing nothing.
It reminds me a little bit the whole, the Pep's what's assistant his name Joan Malilo, who says the faster the ball goes forward, the faster it comes back. And obviously if you go back to like this phase of play here, although Rangers have built slowly, they're then kind of going from middle third to final third really quickly. And as you're saying there, the profile of player Lawrence isn't a profile who's like, I don't like a Raskin or a Barron, someone who's probably really comfortable going up in a man-for-man system and closing down this ball instead of backing off. And that lines up with what you saw. So if you take where Rangers' season really fell apart last March, something I kept bringing up at the time about defensive structure was the wingers. The fact that Rangers didn't have wingers in an attacking sense was harming them, but also because the players they were having to move there, the players they were having to play there. So if you go back, and I realise this is a niche reference, but if you go back and you watch the goal that Rangers conceded against Hibs in that 3-1 win, which is March, it's just before the nosedive starts to happen in terms of form. It's just before the Hibs game. Sorry, just before the Ross County game away from home where they conceded like a million counter-attacks. Look at the build-up to that goal. I've not got it to hand, but you have Lundstrom's making a wide run. The reason Lundstrom's making a wide run is because Silva and Barisic, they don't have enough tools to their game to really break down a defence, so they require something else. And if you look at the build-up to Tavernier's goal as well, it's Lundstrom making a wide run to cross that ball. Why does that matter? Because it leaves no one at the base of that triangle. So if you've got three players there who can do everything, it's great because I don't know, even like a Kamara, Kent, and Barisic, to go back to something that's familiar. It's a very well-oiled, even though Barisic is only going to kind of do one thing there, everyone knows their roles. Whereas if you then translate that over to Barisic, Silva, and Lundstrom, no one's there to provide the central coverage. So I realise it's a bit of a niche reference, but I just think we've seen this before. When the profiles aren't right, Rangers off the ball can look really vulnerable to turnovers.
And that's why I think for me, you're kind of stuck between playing the way that you want to play and trying to adapt if players aren't capable. And that was the issue I had in the springtime, playing Fabio Silva and Dujon Sterling wide left and wide right isn't really ideal, but if you're doing it, then you need to pair them with players that are going to get the best out of them. And Barisic and Silva was like two left feet times two. So it's about that balance there. We didn't have that balance there. Therefore, the other parts of the team are having to take the stress to provide for that. And you sort of see it here as well. I see lots of people asking what the point in Mohamed Diamande is. And not that I can't believe it, because I mean he's very obviously a good player. The question, I think, and people maybe don't articulate this well enough, or I don't articulate it well enough. You can be a good player, but also you don't necessarily have to be a match winner. You don't necessarily have to be the guy who's going to pull the team up by the scruff of the neck. Just because we need that player doesn't mean that this player is rubbish because he is maybe not shown to be that guy. Very obviously a really tidy player. What does he do is the thing that gets mentioned quite a lot as well. I have to admit, I was expecting more in terms of end product from him, from his time in Denmark. He did have quite good numbers in terms of passing. He had really good numbers in this game for his creativity in terms of his expected assists. He probably should have had a goal, but I think he's hamstrung a little bit by what we're saying here, having to compensate, having to be the guy who comes a little bit deeper and links, etc. For me, he's an attacking eight who's able to connect the first third with the final third, if you like. Not what he's doing just now, where he's sort of having to sit as that deeper midfielder at times with Barron and sort of link play that way. So there's a bit of a misuse there. But for me, very obviously a good player, and one of those guys that you would imagine if we were in a bit more of a competent structure, then you could be able to see the best of him. So it's just that whole balancing act between good player not being used in a way that gets the best out of him versus the other. Yeah.
I just don't think he gets the ball enough. I think if you watch Diamande, how many he spends so much of the game with his arms open, demanding the ball. And I think what you saw in the first 20 minutes, how you saw Rangers play in the first 20 minutes, I think that gets the best out of him on the ball. Okay, maybe he wasn't involved tons, and I can't think of how good he was off the top of my head. The remaining 70 minutes, I agree. I think it requires him to do a lot of off-ball work, winning second balls. But I think if you watch him in a game, how often he doesn't get the ball, that probably, as you're kind of outlining there, is pretty helpful as well for why his influence maybe isn't always as obvious.
I think so. For me, the team needs a number six. We've been saying this for so long. They need a number six who can negate most of these issues that we're talking about here, with Tom Lawrence having to come deep and causing an imbalance. A proper number six negates that. We don't need Barron and Lawrence coming deep to create a box so that the centre halves can pass round. If you've got a number six that's competent, they can take the ball under pressure, they can spin, and they can pass through. It kills that issue. The issue we're speaking about with the change from a back three to a back four for Dundee United, and there's less space for us, it kills that issue as well, because an experienced, competent number 6 will find those passes, will put the passes through consistently, time and time again. That allows Diomande to play 10 yards further up. He doesn't have to worry as much about tracking back, getting caught with a shape here, because you've got a number 6 that can cover ground and can pass. That's the key for me, certainly in terms of the build-up and in transition, etc. That's the one thing that we don't have. Outside of, I would say the two things that I think we're quite badly missing in that defensive area is players who are physically dominant 1v1. I think we mentioned that before. And then that number 6 who can bring the ball in and pass it through. Those two things are missing. So everything we're speaking about here are symptoms of that, in my opinion. And we're having to adapt. And the manager said himself, we're having to play players in there who can do it, but are not experts in it. Which I think is where we're seeing lots of trade-offs, yeah.
Okay, right, let's move on to finally talk about Hamza Igamane. A lot of people have rightly pointed out that he's only played about 2 minutes, and I would like to caveat this section, if I can use that word, by saying that we're more, rather than, I think, signposting what he's going to do, it's okay to look at what he's done from the bench in 30 minutes, because it did improve Rangers' performance. Another stat for you, Adam. In the 20 minutes before Igamane came on in the second half, so 45 minutes to 65 minutes, Rangers had only created 0.04 expected goals. In the final 30 minutes, that number stood at 0.41, with Igamane responsible for creating 3 chances that he did not himself attempt, and then 1 header from a corner. Just going to play a few of these clips, and we can discuss a little bit about Igamane, what he brings, maybe in contrast to Dessers. The first one is a good example of how he's different as a striker. He wants to move towards the ball, and Dessers doesn't. Links play from a throw-in, playing in front of the centre halves, where they don't really want to go. United have become more stretched because they've moved from a back 3 to a back 4, probably playing 2 centre halves who aren't that agile in terms of moving into the space behind in the midfield. Again, Links play uses his chest really well, as he did throughout the game, and that's a decent opportunity for Tom Lawrence, which he maybe should hit the target from. Before we just talk about how he brought the ball down on a couple of occasions from long balls, because he won 6 of 9 aerial duels, and he looked pretty strong in there to me.
Yeah.
Clement has only had 1 fit striker basically his whole time at Rangers. Danilo's injuries, Sima's injuries, Roof's injuries, etc., etc. So he's had to play Dessers in all types of games. Dessers will score goals, and I would still expect Dessers to score 20 goals this season. Now, he's still got 5 goals and 2 assists already this season. He's obviously not flavour of the month at the moment. I put a piece out earlier in the week where I effectively said that I think Igamane can help all parties, because Dessers isn't a striker for all parties. And this is why, if I go back to this pass network quickly, I think when Rangers have territory, Dessers can link play, and you saw that. I don't think it's the best part of his game, but it's not as if he can't play those little flicks around the corner. Maybe not that consistently, but obviously came off for the Lawrence goal. When play gets stretched, like it did from 30 minutes to 65 minutes, I don't think he can. He's not someone who holds the ball up very well. He said himself he's a striker who likes to face play. If you think of his goals, it's quite often playing on the shoulder. But the distances, it's not like he's the distance is a whole pitch. It's normally when Rangers have the ball around the halfway line, and he's able to kind of get in behind the high line or escape the attention of a marker in the box. When play gets stretched, you see this all the time in Old Firm games, because he's not going to hold the ball up, and because he's not really got the pace to take the ball down individually and run at a defence. Rangers can get boxed in. That's the difference for me with Igamane, what we've seen so far. If you look at this clip, United again have matched Rangers in the build-up. Butland goes long. This was right from, I think this was, sorry, that's the wrong one. This was almost right from the bench. It was proper this time. Again, United have the numbers matching Rangers in the build-up. Igamane obviously drops in. It's the one everyone was talking about on Twitter, because he took it on his chest really nicely. Plays in Lawrence. This is really simple, but I just think it's something that Dessers doesn't do. You know what I mean? He's not someone who moves away from the ball rather than towards it. And that should, in theory, in these type of away games, help Rangers link play when they do go long, if they do have these build-up issues, because largely Clement only had 1 type of striker in Dessers, even though Dessers is not a striker for all game states. I don't know if that makes sense. I realise I kind of made about 200 points at once there, but I'll throw it back to you to knit it together.
Yeah, so it does make sense. And I think it's just exactly what we've been speaking about there. Cyril Dessers doesn't suit the style of play that the manager wants to play at all for me. Cyril Dessers would suit a style of play which consistently prioritizes fullbacks and wingers getting to the byline and cutting the ball back into the box. 100%. That's what he would want to do. Like he said himself, he wants to be facing the goal. He wants to have it in central areas. He's an instinctive player. Yes, he scored some really nice goals and made some really nice passes, but that consistency aspect that you've spoken about, it's just not his game. Doesn't make him awful, hopeless, terrible, but give him the ball in the middle of the box. He's terrific at finding space in the box. So that's what he needs, in my opinion. We don't play that way at all. We should play that way, but we don't play that way at all. I think that's something we've been blue in the face talking about, even since Stephen Gerrard times, that we should prioritise that more, because many teams prioritise getting in behind in the wide flanks, in behind the flanks, and hitting the byline and cross and cutting back in. That's how most goals are scored in elite football. But we don't do it. So you're then caught between these two ideals or these two styles. Punting the ball up to Dessers doesn't work. Like you said, it might come off sometimes, but it doesn't work because he's not comfortable back to goal. He doesn't want to come deep, as we said. Probably can't run in behind either very often. So that's where you've got an issue. With Igamane, he can do all of those things. He is suited to this type of football, like you said, for this example here. If we're going to play direct and you get the ball to him and you turn, no one's going to complain about being a long ball team if Hamza Igamane consistently does these very simple things well, things that Cyril Dessers can't do in this situation. It's all about players that suit the style of play that you want to play. If you have those players in there and you have a clear plan and that plan works, everyone will be talking about how great your style of play is. That's just the way that football works. If you try and play this style of play and it doesn't work because the players aren't capable of it, people will say your style of play is rubbish or you don't have one. You need to have both. You need to have the players that are capable of it and the idea of what you want to do. And I think that's the difference with Igamane. He is one of those players that I mentioned who seems to be capable one-on-one. You see him picking up the ball, driving at players. Not seen a huge amount of his finishing or his shooting yet, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But certainly in those situations that we're talking about, getting the ball up the pitch quickly, giving them difficult passes, letting them spin, play players in, he looks to be someone who can do those things. Whether he can do it consistently, whether he was not beginner's luck, but you know what I mean, a sort of first off the bench and having a good impact. I guess we'll see how he is from the start, all those type of things. But he looks to be one of those players we've been speaking about that will dominate physically, can bring the ball in, can turn, can move, is pretty quick, has a nice build. And this might be a niche thing, but one of the most pleasing things for me was a striker making a near post run from a corner. I cannot tell you the last time that's happened to us, and he did that in this game, and he hit the side netting, I think.
Yeah.
That just makes so much difference because, again, from corners, for me, quite a lot of the opportunities that we should get are strikers making near post runs, because when it goes into the box in that way, you know what it's like. It's a lottery. Defenders are bigger, all that sort of stuff. So, like to see a little bit of variation. If you've got someone that wants to consistently make those runs and has the athleticism to make them and connect with the ball, then that could help us out as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget that Clement, when he had Danilo fit, Danilo was his first choice, and Danilo, it feels like forever since we've seen him play football, but he can play with his back to goal. He can link play. He can drop into those spaces, but also off the ball. Dessers is a hard worker, and I think he's a clever presser. But you see, especially when you play him and Lawrence, that he's not quick. So I think the best performance Rangers have probably had off the ball was again, or one of them was Sparta Prague at home, when Danilo, he scored once that night, but he could have scored twice, and they scored a goal. I think that his goal derived from a pressing moment.
Yeah,
he's obviously just quicker over those kind of first few yards, and then there's a knock-on effect behind them from the other players that are pressing as well. As I say, I still think Dessers will put in the piece I wrote about him this week. His goal drought, it's not goal drought, he's not scored in 2 games. I don't expect that to last probably beyond September. I think it could suit all parties if you have him fresher for games that suit him, so games at Ibrox, games where territory is Rangers have the territory more as a default, like the 20 minutes of this game. When Rangers need to play for territory, when they need someone to get them up the pitch, when they need someone to go over a press, I think Igamane, sort of from the first 30 minutes we've seen, looks like he might help Clement more in that regard. And I guess just to finish on this, Adam, that's something that Clement hasn't had so far really at all. It'd be interesting to actually look at the number of games he's had a striking option on the bench compared to the number of games he hasn't. This is an option to introduce a little bit of variation in a way that he probably hasn't before with the striking options.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you think of them as a sort of left to right, you've got Dessers on one side, you've got Igamane on the other side, and then for me, you've probably got Danilo in the middle. There in terms of a little bit of both. He doesn't quite have the sort of explosive pace or physicality that we think Igamane potentially could bring, but he is probably the most intelligent in there, I would say. So yeah, I agree. I think Tom Lawrence had a really good game, I thought, on the ball. Still got off the ball issues in there. Probably should have scored another one. He had 3, maybe 4 good opportunities. We got 6 shots on target, and we only scored from 1, which will be, but that certainly is disappointing. I think the majority of them are probably in the first half. He can contribute. I know people. Seems to be a lightning rod for people. Tom Lawrence can contribute, but I think it's the same as Dessers. I think it's very specific moments, and it's probably off the bench. It's probably coming on to try and do something off the cuff and nick a goal, or in Dessers' case, probably quite similar. So ideally, I wouldn't want either of them starting consistently in every single game because they do have deficiencies in there. But I think those are two of the few that people probably want to leave that I think are probably the likeliest two that can still contribute a good bit more over the season, but they need support in there. It's been the two of them basically since the start of the season. It's been Dessers for most of this calendar year. They need support in there. If it's Igamane coming in, if it's Bayrami, who we've not even spoken about yet, Cortez getting back up to speed, Czerny coming in, if we can start to get a settled 4-5 attackers who can play consistently, and then we have those guys to come off the bench to help support or rotate, as you've said, then I think that could only be beneficial.
Listen, we'll leave it there. A pleasure as always, and we'll be back, I think, at some point next week. Obviously, the midweek game, which complicates matters somewhat. But listen, if you're enjoying these videos and you want us to cover specific topics, do let us know. Remember that they're available first to Rangers Review Extra members on our YouTube channel. You get about 4 or 5 extra videos a week, first and early priority, comments on the morning briefing, etc., etc. All the relevant links for that are on our YouTube page. But until then, I will thank Adam again for joining me, and we will speak to you soon.